Hello and welcome to another episode of the International Business Talks series brought to you by Sunway International Business Society. My name is Anastasia and I am joined here today by Dr. Mohan Avvari from Nottingham University Business School. So hello Dr. Mohan, how are you today?
Hi, Anastasia. Doing good, thank you. Can't complain again, right? Given the
Yeah.
circumstances, we are all keeping well.
Yes, that's true, as long as
Yeah,
we're all safe and healthy. So
that's right.
first off, could you kindly introduce yourself and tell us a bit on what you do over at NUBS or Nottingham University Business School?
Thank you. Yeah. I'm a faculty member at the business school, and I'm also the director for research as my administrative duty. But I enjoy a lot of practice-related work, so I also sometimes support the MBA program in business linkages. Right? And in terms of my teaching and research, I teach strategy and innovation modules. And in Nottingham, from the beginning, strategy was always linked with sustainability. I'm sure you heard of the single bottom line versus the triple bottom line, right? So
Yes.
even before it was fashionable or the trendy thing, the school always went on that direction. Innovation is seen also as a part of strategy. So in terms of research, I focus on that area. So some colleagues do mergers and acquisitions as strategy. Some look at diversification, conglomerates. My interest has always been on the innovation side. So strategy and innovation are two sub interrelated areas that I'm interested in.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
really interesting about what you do. Okay, so an introductory question to our
Yeah.
discussion today.
Mhm.
What is innovation management and how does it fit into an organization? Over to you.
Right. Uh, I'll start with a little history of how I fell into this innovation management. Right? As I was doing my PhD, my interest actually was in a concept called social marketing, and we wanted to apply it to technology. There were certain technologies that were sustainable, although that was not the word used in the 90s. They were called appropriate technologies, but nobody seemed to like them, especially the ones that was intended to. So I started it that way, but I didn't pass my first proposal. I didn't do a good job of it. And then my supervisor said, well, now that you didn't do a good job, you have two options, either to repeat the whole thing or come into the fold of innovation management. And that got my curiosity. Partly I was lazy to go back and redo the whole proposal. There was an option given to me to do what he wanted. And I discovered that innovation is not just a creativity oriented issue, right? So because when we talk in layman terms, innovation is seen as something new. So from the business school or economics or the studies side, innovation management is a process of how new ideas or new technologies or anything new in an organization moves towards the market. And along the way, people have realized there could be new ideas, new technologies, new products that even the society would need to adopt them, right? So innovation is a process, and since we are both from business schools, let's focus on the businesses, right? So it's a process in businesses where ideas get transformed, whether it's new products, new processes, and now new business models, right? And how they get accepted into the market and society. And managing this process, how quickly, is called the topic of management of innovation.
Great. It's really interesting about how you managed to go from one field and then you're now in innovation and strategy.
Right.
So yeah, in the age of the IR 4.0, as you may
Right.
know, and what we're having today, the global pandemic, what is the importance of innovation strategies, especially in coping with uncertainties and global trends? For instance, how would it affect, for example, the recovery strategy for COVID-19?
Mm. But just before this meeting, I was involved in a discussion, a round table around food systems and
Mm-hmm.
the COVID-19, right? So a lot of the scientists were talking about um, why do you need new ideas? What's happened to the old food systems? So I think that's a good context to answer your question. So COVID-19 has shown that number one, if you depend too much on supply chains that are far away, there can be problems, right? Access to food, food security, and so on. COVID-19 also has opened up the idea of hygiene, right? Extreme hygiene. Not that we were unhygienic, but uh, the contact, coming in close contact to people, coming in close contact to nature in a wrong way is also creating problems. So there seem to be n number of problems that were already there but not acknowledged, and the COVID-19 opened it up on one direction. On the other direction, we know technologies are evolving, whether it's fintech, IR4, robotization, automation. This has been going on for the past 5, 6 decades anyway. So there was IR2, IR3, IR4. We just didn't give it a label, it just went on. And I think this creates lots of, I don't want to use the word problems, we'll go with the Chinese saying, right? Opportunity problem. Creates a lot of venues for strategies for innovation, new ways of doing things, which is be acceptable to all in businesses particularly, right? It also creates an interesting challenge from an innovation strategy point of view, because too much automation means it's seen as less labor, so less employment. And in countries like Malaysia, there is still a need for employment of people, not just the foreign workers, but even Malaysians. And the COVID-19 has created the unemployment problem. So all these, I think, offer an avenue to start looking at how can you look at innovation as an answer to these questions, these issues, and create solutions to these problems, right? From a technology point of view, from the societal point of view, health point of view, and so on. There's other things that have emerged, right? We are all working from home. I never thought I will be adept at teaching online. I thought it's correct to be in front of the class. But I also used to look at a competitor business school in Singapore. It's an Indian business school, and they had this classroom where they have 50 screens, like in a TV studio, and they would be doing their global MBA there with people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And we thought that's a very expensive investment. Now we're doing it with the MS Teams and with Zoom. It's still not the same as meeting together, perhaps, but it's a way, right? And now, in our case, in the business school case, UK and China were faraway campuses, but now we are all on the same screen together. I'm teaching in the UK campus. My counterpart in UK is teaching in my class here, and so various innovative ways are emerging to not just solve the problem, but probably even do more interesting things. So whether it's work from home, teaching and learning from home, and organizations are looking at how they can save costs, right? Not to do away with face-to-face, but now like a hybrid models could emerge. I'll say a few more things. Some of the small and medium enterprises, the cases that we spoke about in our informal conversations, even SMEs in Malaysia are looking at now, if they're single mothers, they can even work from home or work flexibly to solve the problems of the company rather
Yeah.
than go in and clock out. So it's creating so many interesting approaches to doing work and business. Not that this is not possible before, but I think the COVID-19 just pushed it and accelerated it. And everybody is thinking creatively now and trying to solve with new ideas the problems. I see that that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, so it's an interesting point how you said that
Yeah.
the pandemic is actually accelerating everything in terms of innovation
Mm.
and how, especially corporations and SMEs, they need to accelerate on their innovation and
Yeah.
upgrade on their strategies as well. So moving on to the next question. You have a lot of experience working with SMEs on the ground, you know a lot of people. So what are some of the challenges and also resistances in welcoming innovative strategies?
Right. Not just with the companies, right? There's also the market. And anyway, that was also the discussion just now. Whether it's food or clothing, and we've become what is known as a consumption society, right? So I'm sure if you talk to your grandparents or perhaps even your parents, the wardrobe sizes were smaller.
Yeah.
We could do without a car. The way we are living has changed. We've all gone into the suburbs and we drive. And I heard between our discussions, speaking to some friends in other parts of the world, and we have a friend who lives in Switzerland. Apparently, they have to live in certain zones, and their schools allocated. I think it happens in KL also to an extent. The schools nearer to your home are allocated to your children. But that's not what's going on now, right? The university is one end of the town, you live on the other end of the town, and we are driving and so on. So we've gotten used to a certain type of lifestyle, And that poses one of the challenges from the market side or the consumer side, right? I've been hearing things also about instant culture,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So we saw a movie last night. I'm sure you know Bollywood, but there's also Tollywood, Collywood. Every language in India has a movie industry. So in my hometown language, we just happened to see a movie, and they make a joke about this issue. And the bad guy runs a company which will provide instant solutions, and his brand is called Instant. And the good guy, and the good guy has an organic farming company, and he says it'll be slow, but then if you don't take care of the soil, you can destroy it. And he gives an analogy to the villain or the bad guy who has instant solutions. He says, imagine if you were born 6 months earlier or 3 months earlier, what would you be called? So the same thing you should not do with nature. So these are some of the very the situations we're in, right? And the same thing for the SMEs. They're in a pressure. If they're a supplier SME, there are big customers pressuring them, the MNC, right? Produce at lower cost, send it faster. So all this gets interlinked. And the big guys whose investors are stock market investors, speculative investors, they're pressurizing to give returns, quarterly returns. And you saw the news, right? When you see the news, how does it say? It's like the stock price went up now, went down. And you're watching the news and watching every day. Do you really need to have the stock price going up and down? And imagine the pressure on the people running the organizations. Versus in my younger days, companies had a whole year to make a profit. And the public sector organizations had profit very far away. Their first instance was to produce and supply and employ and so on. So all these are creating some challenges and resistances. I think the word is not resistance, it's getting used to a certain, yeah, it is resistance, sorry, getting used to a certain way, and we need to change. So how do we consume less? Whether you're an individual or a company, right? It is comfortable to keep lights on. It is comfortable not to go on around switching off your lights if you're in the home, or if you have to change everything overnight to LED. Let's say if LED is supposed to be the less energy oriented things, not so easy for a company to do. So there will be some resistance that way. Using less or wasting less is also becoming difficult. Now, let's link it to the earlier question you asked, the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, now online consumption has increased. Now,
Yes.
for your food to come the way it should come, packaging is a must, right? We're pressurizing the delivery boys. They have to deliver fast, but they can't shake the goods too much. So I was watching the news and from Singapore how companies have emerged to make Hokkien mee in such a way that when it's sent to your house, it should be as near as to the hawker stall for the taste. That seemed to involve so much packaging. So you have to pack the noodles separately, the liquid carefully. And for this much Hokkien mee, you've got this much waste. Right? I'm not criticizing it. The question was like, what are the challenges? So how do we now change to these things? And again, I suppose that's where the innovation matters, right? In this case, new ideas, new research into solving these problems. And it doesn't have to be through R&D. It can be also in your little hawker stall. What are new ways? I think I shared with you one of the interesting examples in the Taman Desa neighborhood, a
Yes.
young couple of boys, right? How they've started thinking about how to make a sandwich that is much more fresh when it arrives when delivered. So wonderful, right? Two young boys. There's no R&D. All they have is a kitchen. So there seems to be lots of thoughts around these. So these are some of the challenges: urban planning, way in which we're living, the new cultures, etc. Whatever the culture it is, right? Are all causing these challenges and resistances moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that. So
Yeah.
let's move on to the next question.
Yeah.
So as you know, with the introduction of the SDG goals in 2015 and also the Race to Zero movement and the upcoming COP26, which will be held in November,
Right.
where governments and also corporations all around the world are pledging to net zero carbon emissions. What is the importance of innovation in sustainability?
So the net zero movement, the last conversation we had, we saw it as net zero by itself, right? And linked it to waste and water and so on. So today's discussion with some of the scientists and entrepreneurs in the food space gave another perspective. They feel that if you focus on food and production of food, distribution of food, and consumption of food in a good way, in a responsible way, the net zero will be automatically taken care of. Well, obviously, they're from their point of view. Now, the same thing with clothes, the same thing with machines, I suppose, right? So all this gets linked to, again, wasting less. And we can't say now consume less or produce less. Unfortunately, we're in a growth mode. At the same time, economies have to thrive. So that's where I think innovation has some answers, right? How to have new ideas and new ways to be sustainable. And when we say sustainable, I mean not have too much waste, not have too much damage to the nature, at the same time solve local problems. So if in Malaysia it's employment, if it's Singapore, it could be something else. It could be employment of different nature of people. If it's a country like India, where there is a lot more people in the B40 or the poorer segments, perhaps employment of the larger masses would be the first priority. So keeping in mind the local problems or issues, new ideas and innovation definitely has a lot of scope to provide solutions to the net zero movement. So, and it's also interesting how the net zero movement has also generated different terminologies: race to zero, net zero, chasing zero, and so on. So, indicating that you can't just flip overnight. You probably need to do phase by phase, right? Uh, if okay, I'd like to extend this to a little more nuances or some more dimensions. So, if you
Sure.
remember, we had spoken about air-related emissions, right?
Yes.
So there can be a net zero in terms of emissions into the air, emissions into water bodies, which is, I think, a pertinent issue for Malaysia, how lots of the drains going into the rivers causing the pollution, and that again can hit off many problems. So water pollution, air pollution, again, waste and landfills. So air, water, and land, all three are getting affected. And if you just go online and see how many new solutions are emerging. Everybody seems to think it's not there, but within the country itself, there are companies making incinerators for plastic. There are companies that are seeing how you can convert the food waste into vermiculture. These are all old technologies. But there are companies coming out with innovative business models. So if your bread is near to the expiry date, they have an innovative pricing model to make you buy. One of our students, who's now with one of the entrepreneurial entities, he started trying out this to collect all the bake products which have 1 or 2 days life left and sell it at half the price and share the revenue with the bakeries. So there seem to be innovation possible even in distribution and in pricing to solve this issue of net zero. So imagine if that's a norm, right? And I think it already happens. If you go to the higher end hotels and bakeries, the cake that is sold at 12 ringgit in the morning is 6 ringgit in the evening
Yeah.
for it to be it's not to be wasted and to be sold off. So essentially an Air Asia pricing method for food and so on. So again, endless new ideas which can be proposed to the market for sustainability, for net zero and so on, right? And the last point is there seem to be many solutions in our past which we have ignored, right? Traditional medicine, whether it's Malay, Chinese, or tribal related. There could also be traditional ways of agriculture. How do we get that into the modern era? So we were discussing now the traditional agriculture in let's say the Borneo Island can't produce for masses. They're all small scale farms and so on. What if they get linked to the high end supermarkets? And who could do that? So one of the entities in Nottingham called Crops for the Future was thinking about it. So rather than get the farmers to change their ways, the old systems could continue. The land can remain the way it was done without damage of fertilizers, etc. But we start targeting it towards other customers. So could we bring old ways back? It's called the old science. Can we bring old science and marry it to provide solutions to the new problems? Uh, and see how we can work out these solutions for various aspects of the net zero issue.
Yeah, I really like your point about combining the old knowledge and also the modern knowledge, the new knowledge, to come up with a solution that delivers maximum results. Because at the end of the day, that's what you want.
Correct.
So, moving on to the next question, yeah. So, segue to the previous question, how can business actions contribute to this impact? And based on your experience as well, could you give us a few examples of some of the business actions from the SMEs that are, contributing to this impact?
So a business, you know the word value chain now, right? So from beginning to end, at every point, I think businesses can do fabulous things. So let's link it to the previous discussion, this sudden spur and growth in the online purchases, online delivery, etc., which has led to packaging. So we can't get away from it. So what could be innovations that business could introduce in terms of packaging? Or could you design products for easy packaging and easy transport also? I'm sure you heard of this. I'm not sure if it's an innovation or if it's a quirk, but the Japanese designing cubed watermelons
Yes.
just so that they pack very well. Now, I'm not sure how good it is to play with nature like that, but it's a thought, right? And then you hear about big companies like IKEA that from the beginning they designed products for easy transport so they could keep their costs low. So businesses are driven by either reducing the costs and making their competitive advantage, or increasing the pricing margins and maintain their competitive advantage. So there are many ways in which I wanted to share with you in the health services, and this is something perhaps even Sunway would be interested, right? As students of Sunway, you have a big hospital, it's a private hospital. Now, in my home country in India, some of the posh hospitals have a pricing system. So if you're a regular customer, you pay a regular price and they make their profit. And those are the middle floors. If you're a premium customer, you pay 4 times or 2 times or something more, whatever. Let's go with 4 times. Okay. And
Yeah.
this was something we experienced with my grandmother, who's no more. She refused to share a room, and my grandfather had to pay a lot more. And the hospital convinced him that it's not for waste. They said that subsidizes for the lower floors. And the lower floors are for the people of the B40 or the lower income segment. So there's an interesting way in which business can contribute. You don't have to give up your posh hospital. You don't have to stop serving your high-end segments or your targeted market segments, but you could also provide the same service subsidized by the rich. And my grandfather didn't bat an eyelid. Initially, he was like, "This is so much money. We are middle-class people. It was a bit difficult to pay that, but it's a surgery. You're not going to say no to a surgery." But the moment the hospital said that extra money, so if it was 100 for the regular twin sharing room, this was 400. And my grandfather's logic was, why can't we just pay 200 or 250? They said, oh, no, no, that's because the extra money pays uh, for another client. And so there are pricing models around the world that there are ways in which business can contribute. Now, that's from the social point of view. This could also be from sponsoring something, right? If a business alliance comes together, they could do innovations for packaging. One company is going to find it difficult to solve the packaging problem. But if 10 businesses get together, and I was hearing from one of the entrepreneurs in the food systems, a company called Boomgrow, which does machine farming in Ampang, and they supply it only to nearby locations because they don't want to hit the net zero. They want to hit the net zero target, minimum transport, freshness of food, and so on. So apparently now demand is picking up. Faraway locations from KL are asking for them. And when they said it's too small for us to deliver so far, it's not correct. Immediately, the neighborhood communities are saying we'll do a community demand. So interesting, right? So the businesses and the communities could contribute in various ways to this problem, not just net zero, but there could be innovations that can emerge. So this is in the e-commerce space. This was called aggregating demand, right? So the Lazaras, etc., they'll get all the demand together and give it to one small company, or they aggregate supply and put it on one place. And this is happening even without a Lazada or a marketplace, just because they were innovative solutions. So the innovative solutions could find innovative distribution methods and innovative ways to solve the sustainability problem. So these are just some examples. And I'm only focusing on packaging. What about production? Role of science and technology. So today they were asking, there's enough bioscience, enough biotech in the world to solve these problems. Why aren't the universities talking? And get me thinking. So we were thinking maybe universities should become also slightly marketing oriented organizations to to talk about the sustainability solutions, right? And what could businesses do? They could also support the universities, right? Work with universities locally. I keep hearing there are interesting academics with solutions. They get awards, but those are inventions. Whereas if a business goes and picks it up and converts it into a commercializable product or service, it becomes an innovation. So our business is searching for these solutions. That will be interesting to see. In Malaysia, there's the MPOB, Malaysian Palm Oil Board.
Yeah.
They're now even doing road shows so that SMEs can pick up some of the interesting research they have, especially on the sustainability side. So there's just endless ways in which businesses can work and solve these problems. And entrepreneurs are usually the best people, right? An entrepreneur, by definition, wants to solve a problem and then make money out of it.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting points over there. So
Yeah.
in our informal discussion that day, you mentioned a bit about how one of the challenges was actually for the SMEs and also some of the companies to in adopting sustainability. The problem is actually about scale. So could you talk a bit about that?
Right. So small companies, if they're suppliers, they have to follow what the customer says, right? So if you're a supplier to big corporations who are making bigger things, usually there the problem is a little less. As long as the big company tells the supplier to do, they will do. But the SMEs that are supplying directly to the market, they are living on a day-to-day situation, isn't it? Their focus is on sales. They have to keep, if no sales, they're gone. And they're in a competitive space. Again, let's go with the food industry or the clothing industry. If I have to ask you, how many brands of t-shirts are available in Malaysia? And if you're an entrepreneur producing a t-shirt, right? From 10 ringgit onwards, if you buy it in 7A from an unknown manufacturer, to the price goes on. And this is how the SMEs have to make their living day by day. So how do you get SMEs to get into this space? One way, of course, I see it as is to educate SMEs. Who should take on the role? Is it the government? And how many things do we ask the government to do? So these are questions that were coming about. Now, that question also was something we discussed in my previous meeting, and we were thinking the role of media and social media. Now, social media influencers, that's the big group now, right?
Yeah.
Why are they only talking about this restaurant's food is so tasty, and then they get their free meal? So for every free meal they get, why can't they even talk about these solutions? And I'm sure the SMEs will pick it up. It's after all, again, selling the idea of sustainability, selling the idea of new ideas for sustainability to an SME also. So that links to that last point, right? SMEs are run by entrepreneurial people. They're out to make a livelihood on their own. So I'll last time we couldn't discuss about this fantastic Malaysian company. I'm saying it's fantastic with no research because when I first came to Malaysia, I was looking for cases, local cases, and it was the early days of Google, yeah, and it was still InfoSeek and Google. And my search went to an American business school, and the company was Ramly Burger.
Yes, everyone
Somebody
knows Romney Burger.
here, right? But nobody ever thinks of it as a great case study. But the Americans were studying it as a great case study. And the amount of employment it creates. See, now sustainability is not only about the environment and climate zero. You have to employ people. You have to employ people in low skills, mid skills, high skills, and so on. And food is needed by everybody. What if the new solutions? Ramly Burger has now a system, isn't it, where they distribute the patties and the buns and so on. But we know very well that's not the best of ketchup in terms of taste. And the assumption is anything fresh is expensive and it won't go well with their business model. What if these new solutions are provided by local SMEs and they don't have to transport it all the way from Australia or from USA? So the My Burger Lab guy was saying the same thing. They're now making their own sauces, but some of their special ingredients have to come from imported sources. How do you sell these ideas to SMEs? And I'm sure there's enough creativity. I'm sure there's enough materials in the country. Now, that's the food space, fashion space. And I think it's emerging now, right? Thrift shops are emerging in the younger community. I know for the fact that New Central Mall, unfortunately now that's not the space to go, but has a whole section for local designers, right? Fashion Valley made such a fantastic presence into the market, and they're all SMEs, right? They're not large corporations. But there seems to be a way that if you throw the problem to an SME and make them aware of the issues, solutions will emerge. So who's talking? Suddenly SMEs, some of them seem to understand now what is an ESG, environment, social, and governance issues. Now the governance issue, there's also the issue of being ethical, right? And so on. Why should you ask the SME to have a board of directors? And he's going to look at, I'm the owner, I'm the salesman, I'm the finance guy, and I have 10 workers. What governance do you want? And this time I won't name a name, but in the social enterprise space, there was a problem that one particular social enterprise faced. But apparently they were advised to have a formal governance structure. And that saved them from so many problems, so many problems. So how do we advise SMEs to get onto this kind of thinking? Can SMEs invest in research and development? Many SMEs think it's expensive, it's not for me to do, right? But Malaysia has, SIRIM provides testing facilities. I heard UTM provides testing facilities, right? Universities like Nottingham can, if you collaborate with Nottingham or other such universities, you get a double tax benefit. But these are not being aware. So I suppose awareness building, once you do it, even SMEs can be the solutions or provide the solutions for net zero, employabilities, good packaging, whatever it is. And I believe it is happening slowly. There's a movement across the country, right? The buy local has picked up. I was told there is an online group of about 50,000 followers. My daughter told me,
Mm-hmm.
who were promoting to support the local mama, support the local food, and so on. Again, it's not an anti-foreign goods thinking. You can't do away with globalization for certain things, but where a local solution is available, I think there can be a movement, and that's where the SMEs can start coming and providing solutions.
All right, thank you so much for that extensive example. So I'll move on to the next question. Given that strategic decisions they are made at the top level, so how do we convert or motivate management to adopt sustainability as a strategic goal? And what can management do to successfully impart the strategy and also the vision and these same beliefs to their employees? Because I think, in a sense, um, by successfully and effectively imparting these messages to employees, it is correlated to the employees' motivation and also their satisfaction as well. So could you explain a bit about that?
This is going to be an openly aired video, right? So I cannot name some names, but I'll give you
We can
another
just
anecdote.
say company A, company B.
I'll give an anecdote. Now, this is somebody that I know. I wanted to give an example of whenever you show a benefit, immediately people will do things. Now, many a times I'm criticized for that. Why should everything have a benefit? Sometimes, in the realm of ethics, they'll tell you an outcome need not be the reason you be ethical. You have to be ethical because it's the right thing to do. But for business organizations, you just can't preach that. For an NGO, for an individual, right? I still think it's okay. And in ethics, there is also output-based ethics. So it's perfectly fine that if you do the right thing, consequentialist theories they're called, right? So the consequence is something good. And I think that's the simplest and easiest way. Now, that still sounds very philosophical and up in the air. Let's bring it down. So there were a couple of consumers that I know. They happened to be ladies, and I tried to push H&M to them when H&M came new to the Malaysian market. Good Lord, I should charge them advertising now, advertising fee. I should say a brand that is supposed to be sustainability oriented. They refused to go. They said those fashions don't suit us, it's very different, and so on. But very interestingly, these companies offered a benefit. The benefit is that if you bring the old clothes, they give you a discount off, kind of thing. Immediately, these consumers went there. Um, Nothing wrong. An interesting way in which you teach the market. And as those consumers went and bought the products from there, they also started realizing, and you read about the company you're buying, and you start realizing, oh, this company actually is not a bad company. It makes a good thing, it does some good deeds. They also find out some of the bad things the company has done and wonder whether they should continue. So a benefit-oriented approach, and again, it boils down to two things to businesses. Can you reduce costs? Can you make life easier for my worker? And they go home a happier person, right? And then they
Yeah.
come back more productive. Can you make my life easier? Right? I can't depend on foreign workers anymore. So can this machine replace the foreign worker? And I don't get into all the hassles of regulations and struggles. Can I get a better brand name with this? Do you think people will perceive me to be a better brand? No, branding is something not many Malaysian companies do. So now I can talk about this brand, a furniture company, and he calls himself Harith the Green Carpenter, right? And he makes wooden furniture. He's very artisan. And he says now the younger generation is looking at his kind of products, and he's got competition. And he does the sustainability in multiple ways. He works with uh, this was the beautiful thing. The solution for an SME, he said, he started thinking in the MCO, cutting and all can take place only in the factory. So now the process innovation, he started thinking apparently, how can I send work to the home of the people, especially mothers who have to take care of children and can't come due to the MCO. And they found that certain parts of the furniture can be done at home. He sends them the tools, and it's done at home and then shipped off here, and they're able to produce to a small extent. So again, there are innovations, process innovations that can be done by these clever entrepreneurs in SMEs. Now, if you spread these gospels around, right, these stories and cases, it starts motivating people. If he can do it, why can't I? And of course, some copycats will emerge. There'll be challenges, but that's competition, right? But what if a fabric making company looks at this furniture company? They may get some ideas too. So there are various ways in which education of benefits of sustainability-oriented thinking, and in the discussion just before this, they were talking about the the time factor, the pressure to make profits too much regularly is causing this problem. Is there a way we can ease this? So can we get better finance to do R&D? And that way the SME doesn't feel the pressure, that they will set aside some money to do research without a big burden. So these are things I think that are emerging in the market, and they can provide the solutions, or they can provide the innovations to problems of sustainability.
Okay, so in our previous discussion, we were talking about business models
Right.
that are available for SMEs or even corporations. So, what are some of the innovative business models or strategies that
Right.
businesses can integrate to achieve their sustainability goals?
So I'm trying to articulate it differently this time, right? So one is we can't run away technology. So adopting new interesting technologies as a way for sustainability solutions. And that's where this example we talked about was the boom grow or the vertical farming or tech farming kind of companies. So it's interesting how they made farming a technology business. Now they're going to hire computer scientists, agronomists. It's not the typical farmer tilling in the sand. And they're going to use wasteland, not the fertile soil. So they're not going to take away other farmers' land. And that they can produce food for the cities. So how do we call this as a model, right? So the terms now that have emerged that have always been there again is the circular economy model. Every company may not be able to do a circular economy because they can't take every company's waste can't feed back into their product. So if that's the case, could they do stewardship models? Stewardship meaning their products they will commit to certain clean, green, and sustainability produced products. But this has to be done in collaboration. So collaborative models that are interesting. And that's what I'm looking at. And who should you collaborate with? Apart from your customers, apart from suppliers, you can also collaborate with non-government organizations. So we've done certain cases of jewelry companies, of hotels, and so on, and all of them get knowledge from non-government organizations. If you remember, I was talking about old science. So the Frangipani resorts in Langkawi is linked to certain NGOs, but on his own, he studies traditional knowledge, whether it's Malay, Chinese, or Indian, and how you can do filtering. And he does what is known as a constructed wetland to manage the wastewater of his resort. No impurities goes into the water or into the sewage system in this hotel. So it's not a perfect circular system, but at least the waste part of it is very circular. The end result of his constructed wetland is clean drinking water. And apparently, if you are privileged to have him on the property when you live in his hotel, he'll take you, make you walk from the toilet where the water comes down and across the constructed wetland, and he'll drink the glass of water at the end. And that's how pure it is. He tests it and he checks it and so on. And what's the benefit for this company by doing all of this? His price margin is so high for a given thing, the Europeans, and I was quite pleasantly surprised. After the 2008 economic crisis, when he spoke in a class, he told even the Indian tourist market started coming there. Because these are fascinating things you want to see as a tourist. How can you use local plants to filter water? And all on his property are the frangipani flowers and local ulam ulam. So you get to eat the local things, and that's what a tourist comes for, right? To
Yeah.
experience local things. And it's on the property itself. They don't even have to walk off anywhere. So circular economy models, stewardship models. I love Tanamera. It's all about the local products, right?
Yeah.
So they're a steward of local stories, and they have stories to tell about how the traditional things that can be useful to you, whether it's a facial cream or massage oils. And then again, you end up supporting the local sources of the supply. So you remember we spoke about the dragon fruit. So your local dragon fruit can become your lipstick. But it's of course a small thing, and there's so many ways in which you can look at these things, right? So local large companies, local small companies, there are fantastic cases that offer interesting models and innovations that can work towards sustainability. It's a matter of making it into a movement. I didn't remember that last time, but in the discussion in this afternoon, so this creation of a movement and a frenzy, and so the role of media organizations. So there's models on one side, but how media organizations, individuals in social media can also have ways in which you can innovatively promote these models.
Yeah, that's really interesting about how you introduce the different types of model. For example, the stewardship and the collaborative model, as well as the circular economy model, where you um, shift from the traditional linear economy model.
Right.
So I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and it was related to our previous discussion, was about how corporations, they don't know how to interpret, for example, these SDGs.
Mm.
So how can we, for example, as a university, interpret it for them and make it something that they would commit to?
Right. So once you start teaching these in classrooms and it becomes part of the entrepreneurship labs, and if you start saying we'll fund you only if you target SDGs, everybody falls in line, right? Investment is the best way. I believe the relevant institutions in Malaysia have already started that. So it's a matter of time. But that's from the top. And now from the bottom up, universities, one of the best role the universities in today's world can take is not for teaching itself. My role, for example, I'm sure you can find all of this online, right? Somewhere or the other. So the role of the researcher and the role of the academic is to curate this so that the students access the correct knowledge and do critical thinking. It's not like in the past where I can present to you and show off that I know it and you listen to me. Uh, when I say anything now, again, my daughters are my litmus test. They know everything. They know everything about the vaccines. They know mRNA versus the other vaccine. So, but if I were a molecular scientist or if I were a virologist, my role would be to curate. My dear, where did you get this knowledge from? I hope it's not from dash dash dash.com. What should be the source, and so on. So that's the role I think we can take as university fraternity. I won't use the word even student and teacher, the learning community, right? You would bring in various materials. I can't surf 100 websites, but the class of 30 students or 60 students, and each of them will serve so much information. So this information, if we curate and validate and critically look at, and that's the role we see ourselves as universities, critical thinking, question correctly, not just simply for the sake of avoiding work. That's some of the naughty questions, right? So we're questioning to see if this is a valid data. So that's the role of the universities. Now for the corporations, how do we inform the corporations? By demand. So whether it's a Sunway University Business School or a Nottingham University Business School, any of the UBSs, so there are 600 students there, 1,000 students somewhere, 300 in my session. and it becomes a force. We are also teaching you indirectly to start creating the demand for these things. And once demand is there, everything will follow, right? That's the only law in social sciences, or near law. Let's keep the theory and conditions aside. But the moment there is demand, whether it's an SME or a large corporation, they follow. And this is what we also heard from Bursa, interestingly, that they will look at demand and the investment sides of things. And I think that's a very interesting way in which the country's relevant institutions are looking at. Right? So now you know, right? The business schools, whether it's Sunway or any school, any university, is looking at supporting startup development, whether it's through a lab, whatever lab it's called, Maker Lab, Ingenuity Lab, or Seed Lab, whatever. These are the places where we can then produce and also create the demand for an SDG-oriented product and process.
Right, that's a really interesting point. So another question that I wanted to ask you about was, now we have this term, it's called the green financing. It's not a new term, but could you briefly explain on how important about this green financing is to accelerate the whole net zero economy, especially in terms of the our SMEs and also large corporations?
This is one of the incentives we can give, right? The financial institutions can give. And I believe the movement has started in Malaysia, without naming the institutions. So when a bank or a financial institution gives a loan, or an investor wants to invest, previously the questions asked were around uh, credit security, credit risk, or the ability to pay off, or the ability to generate revenues, right? And now I believe these institutions are asking, can you also show that you don't do harm to the environment, that you won't do harm to the society, or you could offer solutions to society? That's the best way in which you can push the sustainability or the responsible business agenda. I think the green financing term is just a temporary term. I'm sure moving forward this will become the norm. Right. This used to be the case in relatively socialist countries. So when we studied business in my days, we had a module, and we were taught a concept called cost benefit analysis and then social cost benefit analysis. So if you were in socialist countries and you needed to get the license from the government, you have to also show the social benefits you would bring through your project. So our assignment was done around a battery making company. These are batteries for cars and railway engines and so on. And we were made to go to that company, and it was in a remote location. In today's world, they would say that's the worst place to start a factory, and the costs are very high. There's not great public transport, so the company has to invest in buses to get their workers there. But I heard that it's still doing very well. It also exports to Singapore. They had the latest technology called maintenance-free batteries. This is the 1980s. But their social cost benefit analysis showed the amount of local employment they will generate. So if they're going to employ 300 workers in that small town who take away X salary, so 300 into X, which means they generate a demand of Y for the N number of activities in the town. And that used to be the way. If you Google it, it's a UN concept, SCBA. So now it's, of course, SECBA, Social and Environment Cost Benefit Analysis. The economists have always been teaching it as externalities, but along the way, apparently, we lost our way because, um, let's not be politically incorrect. So many things happened, consumption-led, credit-led societies, and so on. So probably that's why going back to the old ways, right? Allow me a minute to say something. I'm always now reminded, which I think many a Malaysian will relate to, at least Malaysians of my age or people who lived in small villages. My grandfather's house was one of the best examples for circular economy. Uh, I don't think it was because of any reason, but their thinking was anyway fixed that way, right? They wouldn't use synthetic uh, soaps and sandwiches. In India, there is something called a soap nut. It grows on a tree, and you either buy it. In my grandfather's house, there was also a tree. So the homegrown soap nuts were for special occasions to take your head bath, and the bought one was for the regular reasons. We hated it as children because in my mother's house it would be shampoo. But if you look at it from a circular economy, the soap nuts don't generate any synthetic waste, and the water would go into the plantain trees, right? So the water goes there, I get the plantain, and I eat the plantain, and there's a circular economy going. the kitchen waste would go there. And the Frangipani hotel guy, that's how he would speak in our class. He says, your shit, I take and I clean and I get back this water. Circular economy too. And so there are amazing things that that had happened in the past. I think we can modify it and modernize it. Uh, and remembering my father's words, apparently in Netherlands they have trucks, which on one side has a vacuum device and on the other hand has a spray device, and they would go around the houses into the septic tanks and suck out all the excreta and spray it into the farms. So one truck could do both. So the last words I'll say is systems, right? The whole system and how we can start moving towards that. And the first point to start that system is demand. So as students particularly, because you're the largest body of young people, if you started, I'm sure the movement will start and amazing things can happen.
All right, thank you so much for that explanation. It just opens up a new horizon to me. So that is all the questions we have for you today, and also the time. But thank you so much, Dr. Mohan. I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion today, and it's been such a pleasure to have you on board to this interview with us, and for sharing these wonderful insights on this interesting topic.
Thanks, Anastasia. It's an opportunity to also share. And academics like to speak, and you've given the opportunity to say my words. Lovely, lovely talking to you, and looking forward to doing collaborations, not just talking collaborations moving forward.
Yes, exciting times ahead for both Nottingham and also Sunway.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll end the interview. Catch us on another episode of International Business Talks. Until then, thank you and goodbye.